Hello, and welcome to another edition of Cracking Cryptic, where today we're actually going to take a look at a Sudoku. This is a diabolical rated Sudoku from the Daily Telegraph today. So I've been buying the Daily Telegraph all this week, just because I thought it would be interesting to compare the level of the Times difficult Sudoku puzzles, which are labelled super fiendish, and the killer Sudokus, which are, I think, labelled deadly, with the equivalent diabolical ratings in the Telegraph. Now, it may be they all get their Sudokus and killer Sudokus from the same, computer manufacturer, and these are equivalent gradings, or I wondered if it was a bit like the Telegraph crossword compared to the Times crossword, where the Times crossword is sort of several degrees harder. So the only way to tell is to take a look. This is the Diabolical Sudoku. I've been buying the paper, so I hope they don't mind us using it and talking through it. And what I'll do first is I'll put in the notes as we've discussed before. So using the Tom Snyder method, I'll be just making notes where any 3x3 box has two cells that can only contain one digit in either of two cells. And we'll see where that takes us. So I'll pause the video now and just fill in the obvious ones. Just a note as we're going through here, you can see the 8s here are going to give us this digit, which is going to force a 7 here. And the next thing to note is that we managed to isolate a 169 in 3 cells here, and in fact then secure a 9 here by virtue of the 9 here and here. So now this row is actually known. So this is going to be a 6, this is going to be a 1, this is going to be a 9. So far I have to say this feels incredibly easy. Let's see where it goes from here. In fact, we can now see that's a 6. That means that's a 6. That means that's a 6. And you can now see that just by cycling through the 8s, I've now managed to place all of those as well. So it's still going incredibly smoothly without me actually having to use any thought at all. Now we can see the 3 in the bottom line has to be here. It's the only place a 3 can go in this row. Now, I've spent about 10 minutes now looking at this, and I have not made any more progress with the Tom Snyder notation. It doesn't mean that you can't make progress using it, but I am really struggling how to see how one would. So what I'm going to propose now is that we go the whole hog, and we try and fully annotate the grid with notes and see whether that sheds some light on what we need to do now. And I should immediately say that I ought to apologise to this Diabolical Sudoku, because I was fairly convinced it was going to be pretty simple about 10 minutes ago, but I no longer think that it is. So let's fully annotate the grid and see what we can see. Okay, so you can immediately see we have a lot more information all of a sudden than we had before. And one of the things that I would always be looking to do in this sort of situation, if I had all of these notes available, would be to look at situations like you get in row 6, where we can see we have a 4-5 here, which locks the 2 in this row into either of these cells. Into either of these cells. Now, that being the case, this cannot be a 2. Yeah, so we need to eliminate that, because that's a pretty important thing, because, well, it's not going to help here, but for similar reasons we could now lock the 2 and the 3 in this row, which would have allowed us to eliminate any 2 or 3 up here. Not relevant here so far as I can see, but still it could be helpful in other Sudokus of this sort of difficulty. So I'm just going to take a look now and see if I can see anything anything clever that we need to start to take into account? Well, again, I can see, I think these are called pointing pairs. I think that's how these are described. So we have a 3 and a 4 here in row 2, which means that the 5 here and here are forced. One of these will be true. Therefore, you can't have a 5 here, here, oops, here, or here. So we're starting to make some progress now. In fact, now you can see we have a 2, 4 in this cell, a 2, 4, 5 here, and a 2, 4, 5 here. So I need to go ahead and eliminate all other 2, 4, 5s from this row. Okay, maybe we're closing in on something. And from here I can also see that there's a 5 in row 3, limited to this middle box, to box B. So therefore this cannot be a 5, so I need to remove that. And then we have an interesting combination of 2, 4 here and 2, 4 here, 2, 4 here, that I feel I need to use somehow. So let me just think about that for a moment. Wow, okay, this is a rather more devious beast than I had first thought. I think you can make progress from here in the following way. I'm going to explain logically how to do this Sudoku, but I'm also going to make the comment now that my belief is that all of the best solvers in the world would not use the following method. What they would do is they would get to a point that resembled this, they would guess. So they would take a cell probably that had a choice of 1 of 2, they would switch to pencil, they would guess, and they're so fast at filling in the rest of the grid that they would reach a contradiction, you know, within 30 seconds. So they would either finish the puzzle, or they would reach the contradiction very, very quickly. They would not have to go to the lengths we're about to have to go to make progress here. Okay, so what we need to consider in relation to these 2 4s that I mentioned before is that these form a sort of chain. So let's imagine just for a moment that in this 2, 4, in this box, let's imagine that this cell was not a 2, it was a 4. What would happen? Could we follow a chain of logic through that would affect this box up here? And we can actually, because if this was a 4, this would be a 2. Yeah? That would mean this could not be a 2, which forces this to be a 2 here, which forces this to be a 2. Okay. And you can work that through the other way round. If, i.e., saying if this wasn't a 2 and this was a 4, what happens? And if you work it down, you actually find that this is then a 2. So we now, you can now prove basically that either this cell is a 2, this one that's highlighted now, hopefully you can see that on the screen, or this cell is a 2. You may say, well, how does that help? Well, what that means is, I think, that this cell can never contain a 2. Because either it will be trumped by this 2 here, or it will be trumped by this 2 here. So we can remove this 2. Okay. And why does that matter? Well, that matters now because if we now look at column 6, we can see that the 2 is now locked in this box here. Okay, so it's either going to be this 2 or this 2, which means we must remove it here. And now there is only one possible location for a 2 in column 5. This is the only cell in column 5 that can contain a 2, so we now need to put this, set this to be equal to 2, as shown here. And astonishingly enough, think you then need to do that again, this time using the relationship between the 4 in this cell here and the 4 in this cell here. And you may say, how on earth can you spot that? Well, you can sort of see how there is a chain of these 4s developing, because well, hopefully you can see, because if this is a 5, this is a 4, yeah, that means this is a 5, that means this is a 4, that's forcing this not to be a 4, this has to be a 2, which forces this to be a 4. Yeah. So you can see how there is an interdependence between these 4, 5 limited number of cells and the 2, 4 limited number of cells down here. And let's just work through that the other way around. If in this cell down here, if this wasn't a 4, if this was a 2, what happens? Well, you just work your way back up the chain in the other direction. So if this was a 2, this is a 4, this is a 5, this is a 4, this is a 5, and this is a 4. So again, we reach this sort of, it's quite a nice logical chain where we can say that either this cell, this central cell, is a 4, or this cell in the bottom right down here is a 4. And that means that neither this cell or this cell can contain a 4. So we should remove them. And you can see now, and I think this was the final step in terms of breaking the logic. You can see now that this is forced to be a 3, this is forced to be a 5. And I suspect that's going to really blow the puzzle open. Because now this is a 4, this is a 5, this is a 4, this is a 5, etc. I'll finish the puzzle off to music just to prove that it was the final step. I mean, I'm sure this was the straw that breaks the camel's back. But one of the things that I think is interesting to note here is that I could not see how to make progress here with Tom Snyder's notation. And to be honest, I think David was kind enough to comment, and Tom Collier actually, on the most recent video where we were looking at notation and what was the best. And I think David's recommendation was not to use any notation at all if you can possibly help it. Well, yeah, on this puzzle, that would be really difficult, I think. So if you're going to use some notation, what would be the best way of cracking a puzzle like this? Under speed solving conditions. And you can see that even if you write down every single combination in this grid, it's still a brute to spot a logical way forward. And therefore I'm sure that the quickest way to do this actually in sort of tournament conditions is to guess. I'm sure that's the case. But it would be nice to feel that you had, you had access to logic if you needed it. But anyway, I hope this is interesting and prompts further discussion. We'll do another one of these. I mean, I think I have to say also that fair play to the Telegraph. I was merrily swanning along thinking this was going to be utterly trivial compared to the Times Sudoku. This was not trivial. This was pretty damn difficult. I may well have missed something as well. I hasten to say that. So if I have, please in the comments explain to me how I could have got there a bit more quickly. But anyway, we'll see you again soon. I may tomorrow, if I get time, do the same thing with the Diabolical Sudoku from the Saturday Telegraph, just to see how that looks. Without further ado, I'll see you soon.